Hi there, and welcome to Explained Simply TV. If this is your first time here, get ready. Because what you're about to hear isn't taught in school. It's not in textbooks. And it's not something the news will ever dive into. But it affects you every single day. The price of your groceries. The weight of your debt. The feeling that no matter how hard you work, you're still falling behind. What if I told you that behind all of this lies a hidden system? Controlled by a small group of men, sitting at the top of the world's financial pyramid? Not elected. Not visible. But powerful beyond imagination. The story begins in 1910. On a remote island off the coast of Georgia, USA. It's called Jekyll Island. Sounds peaceful, even pretty. But what happened there was anything but ordinary. A group of the most powerful bankers and politicians in America snuck off to the island under fake names. They told their staff they were going on a hunting trip. But what they were really doing was designing a new system. One that would quietly take control of America's money. Not by revolution. Not by war. But by policy. Design. Deception. The plan that came out of that meeting became law in 1913. The Federal Reserve Act. It created the Federal Reserve System, America's central bank. And here's the part most people still don't know. The Fed is not a government agency. It's a private banking cartel. Owned by regional banks. Controlled by unelected leaders. And since its creation, the US dollar has lost over 97% of its value. Coincidence? Or by design? Most people think the Federal Reserve is just one big office in Washington, D.C. But it's actually made up of 12 powerful regional banks. In cities like New York, Chicago, Dallas, and San Francisco. Each one is privately owned. Each one has its own president. And together, they form what's known as the Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC. This group meets behind closed doors to make decisions that affect your loans, savings, inflation, and even your job. You don't vote for them. They're not elected. They don't answer to the public. But they control the value of your money, with a single decision. Raise rates? The market drops. Your mortgage goes up. Cut rates? Inflation rises. Your savings shrink. And here's the worst part. When they make mistakes, like in 2008, they get bailed out. You pay the price. That's not just unfair. That's economic control without consent. But this is just the beginning. In Chapter 2, we're going deeper into how money is actually created, why it's not backed by anything real, and how the system uses inflation like a hidden tax to slowly steal your wealth. So don't go anywhere. Because the rabbit hole? It gets a whole lot deeper. Let me ask you something. When you think of money, what comes to mind? Paper bills? Coins? Maybe the number you see in your bank app? Sounds simple, right? But what if I told you that most of the money in the world doesn't actually exist? Not in your wallet. Not in a vault. Not even printed by the government. It's just digits on a screen. Created by banks with a few keystrokes. No gold. No silver. No real-world backing. Just trust. That trust is what gives it power. But who controls that trust? Who decides how much money enters the system? Who decides how much you owe, and how little it'll be worth next year? We're going to answer all of that. And it starts with the illusion. Let's walk through a simple scenario. You walk into a bank. You deposit $1,000. It's your money. You assume it's just sitting there, right? Safe. Waiting. Wrong. The bank only needs to keep a tiny portion, maybe $100, as reserves. The rest? They're allowed to lend it out. Not just once, but over and over again. That $1,000 turns into $900. Then $810. Then $729. Like a magic trick. More and more money appears out of nowhere. But here's the twist, it's not really money. It's debt. Every new dollar created in this system is someone else's loan. Someone else's burden. And in the end, the bank gets the interest. You get the illusion of security. That's fractional reserve banking. The system your entire economy is built on. This might sound crazy. But in our system, debt is money. Not metaphorically. Literally. Every dollar in circulation was born out of someone borrowing. Think about it. If nobody borrowed, no new money would exist. And if everyone paid off their debts tomorrow, the money supply would vanish. That's not just fragile. That's terrifying. Because it means this. Our economy doesn't grow because of value. It grows because of debt. The more we owe, the more money there is. And when people stop borrowing, the economy crashes. So here's the illusion. We call it money. But it's not wealth. It's just a promise. A promise that someone, somewhere, will keep working to pay it back. Let's pause and be real for a second. When you hear debt, what comes to mind? Stress. Struggle. Bills piling up. For most people, debt feels like drowning. But for the wealthy? Debt is a tool. A weapon. A lever to build empires. You borrow to survive. To pay for food. For school. For medical bills. They borrow to buy real estate. Stocks. Businesses. Assets that generate income while they sleep. When you use a credit card, you pay 20% interest. When they borrow millions, they negotiate 2% or less. Then write it off against future earnings. You go into debt. And lose money every month. They go into debt. And get richer by the minute. And it gets worse. Because while you're taxed on every dollar you earn, they borrow against their wealth. Avoid selling it. And legally avoid paying income taxes altogether. It's not a loophole. It's a ladder. Built for them. And you? You were handed the bill. Most people think of central banks like referees. Neutral. Fair. Above the game. But what if they're not the referees? What if they're part of the team, the winning team? Central banks don't print money in the way most people think. What they really do is set the rules of the system. They control the interest rates. Decide how much money flows into the economy. And determine how expensive it is for you, yes, you, to borrow. When the central bank cuts interest rates, everyone cheers. Yay, it's easier to get loans. But here's what really happens. More debt enters the system. Prices go up. Asset bubbles grow. And the people with assets? They get much richer. You, on the other hand? Your rent increases. Your groceries spike. Your savings lose value. In times of crisis, who do central banks help first? Always, the banks. Not the workers. Not small businesses. Not the average citizen. It's a club. And if you're not holding stock in it, you're just holding the fallout. Want proof the system was built to benefit the few? Then let's rewind. It's 1720. France is on the brink of collapse. Enter John Law, a banker with charm and dangerous ideas. He convinces the French government to create paper money. Backed not by gold, but by speculation in land across the ocean, the Mississippi Territory. People rushed to invest. Paper money flooded the economy. And for a while, everyone felt rich. Until it all came crashing down. The land wasn't worth what they claimed. The money was worthless. And the bubble popped. Sound familiar? Fast forward to 2008. Banks created financial products out of risky mortgages. Bundled, sold, and bet on. The ratings were fake. The risks were hidden. And once again, everyone felt rich. Until they didn't. Millions lost homes. Retirements vanished. And the banks? They got bailed out. Because when the system fails, it doesn't punish the architects. It punishes the people inside the building. Over the last few years, governments and central banks have pumped trillions into the economy. They called it stimulus. A rescue package. Help for the people. But, did you feel rescued? Where did all that new money actually go? Let's follow the trail. It went to Wall Street. Stock buybacks. Corporate bailouts. Executive bonuses. Real estate developers bought neighborhoods in cash. Hedge funds scooped up single-family homes. Prices skyrocketed. And the average family got pushed out. You see, when new money is created, it doesn't rain down evenly. It flows through the top of the system first. That's called the Cantillon effect. Those closest to the money printer benefit the most. Those furthest away? They get inflation. You didn't get the fresh money. You got the higher rent, the more expensive groceries, and the shrinking paycheck. That's not a glitch. That's how the system works. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered, why does our government borrow money from private banks just to fund schools or hospitals? Or why must we pay interest on money that's created out of nothing? Why is every new dollar born from debt, when we could, in theory, just issue money without debt attached? You're not supposed to ask these questions. Not in school. Not in the media. And definitely not at the dinner table. Instead, you're bombarded with jargon. Quantitative easing. Liquidity injections. Inflation targeting. Complex words. Intentionally confusing. Because if the system can't be understood, it can't be questioned. But the truth? The truth is simple. The system isn't designed to empower you. It's designed to keep you running, working, owing, spending, without ever asking why. But now, you're asking. And that's where real power begins. So now you know. Money isn't really money. It's credit. It's debt. It's control. The more debt they create, the more power they hold. You've just seen behind the curtain. And trust me, we've only scratched the surface. Because in the next chapter, we leave your country behind and go global. We'll explore the network of central banks that work together, often in secret. We'll expose the Bank for International Settlements, the central bank of central banks. And we'll look at how these institutions manipulate currencies, influence wars, and reshape economies, all without a single vote cast. Most people have never even heard of them. But they play a role in every recession, every boom, every crash. So if you thought today's system was wild, just wait until you see who's really pulling the strings behind the strings. Stay with me. Subscribe. And let's keep digging. In the last chapter, we explored how banks create money out of nothing, and how the system is built on debt. But what if I told you that this system isn't just national? It's global. A vast, tightly woven web of central banks, private banks, and international institutions. All following the same playbook, with the same endgame. And at the center of this web? A little-known organization. Hidden in plain sight, based in Basel, Switzerland. The Bank for International Settlements, or BIS. Most people have never even heard of it. But it's one of the most powerful financial entities on Earth. The BIS doesn't serve citizens. It serves central banks. It sets global monetary standards, hosts secretive meetings, and influences decisions that ripple across the entire world economy. You didn't vote for them. They don't answer to your government. But their policies shape your life. From how much you pay in interest, to whether your currency rises or crashes. This isn't conspiracy. This is the architecture of the modern monetary world. And most people have no idea it even exists. To understand the Bank for International Settlements, we have to go back, way back. The BIS was founded in 1930. Officially, its purpose was simple: to help manage war reparations after World War I. But the real story is darker. The BIS became a hub for the world's most powerful central banks. A place where they could meet in private, share intelligence, and coordinate behind closed doors. Even during World War II, the BIS didn't stop operating. In fact, it kept channels open between central banks, even as their nations were at war. Think about that. While bombs were falling and millions were dying, the bankers kept meeting. Enemy countries. Same table. Quiet deals. The BIS has always functioned above nations. Immune to laws. Immune to politics. Immune to war. It doesn't take orders. It gives guidance to the institutions that control your money. And the shocking part? Most elected officials don't even fully understand its power. Because this isn't just a bank. It's a financial embassy for a global elite. If you've never heard of the BIS, that's not by accident. It doesn't seek headlines. It doesn't hold press conferences. But behind the scenes? It's everywhere. The BIS serves as a coordinator, bringing central banks together to align their policies. That means interest rate decisions, inflation targets, even money printing operations are quietly guided in unison. When countries raise or lower interest rates at the same time, that's not coincidence. That's coordination. Through committees, research, and private meetings, the BIS pushes agendas that affect billions of people. It sets the tone for monetary policy. Without ever passing a law. No votes. No accountability. Just quiet influence, across borders, currencies, and governments. And during financial crises? The BIS acts as a stabilizer. But also as a strategist. It decides which markets get support. And which ones get left to fall. Think of it like the control tower of global finance. You don't see it. But it directs all the traffic. And it never touches the brakes. What if I told you that there's a place in Europe where financial officials can't be searched, can't be taxed, and can't be arrested, even by police? That place is the Bank for International Settlements. According to international agreements, the BIS is protected by full diplomatic immunity. That means its offices cannot be searched, its staff cannot be detained, its records are off limits to governments. Not only that, the BIS is also exempt from taxes. Its communications are encrypted and protected. And it's not subject to the laws of Switzerland or any other country. It exists in a legal gray zone. Untouchable. Imagine if your local bank was immune to prosecution, immune to audits, and answerable to no one. That's the BIS. And yet, it helps set the rules for every other bank in the world. This isn't accountability. This is financial sovereignty, wielded by an institution you didn't even know existed. Until now, you might be thinking, okay, the BIS is powerful, but how does that affect my daily life? The truth? It affects everything. Start with your rent. When central banks, guided by BIS policy, keep interest rates low, it makes borrowing cheap for investors. They scoop up properties, drive prices sky high. And you? You can't compete. You end up paying more for less. Or take your paycheck. Central banks aim for 2% inflation every year. But wages don't rise in sync. So every year, your money buys you less. Slowly, quietly, predictably. The BIS calls this price stability. But for you, it means groceries that used to cost $50 now cost $80. It means saving gets you nowhere. It means you run harder just to stay in the same place. And here's the kicker. These policies aren't decided in your city. Not even your country. They're set in a quiet boardroom in Switzerland. Behind closed doors. By people you didn't elect. That's why this matters. Because your cost of living is someone else's financial experiment. You've heard of central banks. You've now met the BIS. But the real question is, who influences them? Who sits at the table? Not just to listen, but to steer? It's not a single person. Not even a single institution. It's a network. Quiet, persistent, old. Families like the Rothschild, the Warburgs, the Rockefellers. Dynasties with roots in global finance for centuries. Investment firms like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. Managing trillions. With silent stakes in nearly every bank, tech company, and media outlet. Then there are the think tanks. The World Economic Forum. The Trilateral Commission. The Council on Foreign Relations. These aren't just discussion groups. They shape monetary policy. Long before you hear about it on the news. Add in tech billionaires, digital currency advocates, ESG finance lobbyists. And you have a power block that shapes the very architecture of modern money. They don't need conspiracies. Just access, influence, and time. And through institutions like the BIS, their vision quietly becomes your reality. Without debate. Without resistance. Without you even realizing it. You'd think by now. Some leader, some country, some movement would have stood up and said, enough. But here's the harsh truth. Very few have. And those who did? Didn't last long. In 1965, France's Charles de Gaulle began demanding gold in exchange for US dollars, exposing flaws in the dollar's post-war dominance. Within years, the US closed the gold window. The dollar became fiat. And France? Marginalized. In the 2000s, Iraq's Saddam Hussein began trading oil in euros, not dollars. He was removed. In 2011, Libya's Muammar Gaddafi proposed a Pan-African gold-backed currency. He was bombed. His country collapsed. Coincidence? Maybe. But history has a pattern. Countries that threaten the global monetary order rarely survive untouched. And inside the system? Central bankers who dissent don't get airtime. They get replaced, silenced, or moved into advisory roles. Because in a game this big, with stakes this high, there's no room for rebels. Only architects and enforcers. The future of money isn't just digital. It's programmable. Across the world, central banks are testing something called CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. On the surface, it sounds convenient. Instant payments. No need for cash. Secure. Efficient. But under the hood? Something much more powerful, and dangerous, is brewing. Unlike cash, CBDCs can be programmed. That means your money could have an expiration date. It could be restricted to certain vendors. Or blocked if you misuse it. Imagine a world where your carbon footprint is too high, so your travel budget gets capped. You criticize the wrong policy. Suddenly, your payment fails. You try to save too much. And the system forces you to spend or lose it. This isn't science fiction. These capabilities already exist. And the BIS? It's one of the leading coordinators of this global rollout. Once these tools are fully adopted, control won't require force. It'll just require permission. And if your money needs permission to move, it's no longer your money. By now, you're probably feeling it. That strange combination of awe, anger, and realization. This isn't just about banks. It's not just about interest rates or inflation. It's about control. Control over time. Over freedom. Over behavior. Through the illusion of choice. A swipe. A tap. A paycheck. A loan. But every part of the system, from your debit card to international currency swaps, leads back to unelected institutions. Names you don't know. Rules you didn't vote for. Outcomes you never consented to. They built the system to look clean. Efficient. Secure. But underneath? It's opaque. Complex. Rigged. And if you're not paying attention, you become just another data point in someone else's empire. But if you are paying attention, then you're already doing what they fear most. Asking questions. You've made it this far. You've seen the hidden structures. The faces behind the curtain. The silence behind the systems. The question now is, what do we do with this knowledge? The banking cartel isn't just historical. It's not just technical. It's strategic. Designed to evolve. Every crisis, every war, every shift in power. It adapts. It consolidates. And it grows quieter. But you? You're no longer quiet. You've seen how money is created. How it's weaponized. How the rules are written far from where you live. Yet shape everything you do. And in Chapter 4, we ask a dangerous question. What happens when people stop believing in the money itself? When trust collapses and history starts to repeat? We're going deeper into the collapse of empires, hyperinflation, and the war on alternative currencies. Because the next chapter might be the one you're already living. Money is more than paper. It's trust. Trust that what you earn today will be worth something tomorrow. But what happens when that trust is broken? When people stop believing in the value of their currency? History gives us the answer. And it's terrifying. In the 1920s, Germany printed so much money. It took wheelbarrows of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. People burned money for heat. Not because it was worthless, but because it was cheaper than firewood. In 2008, Zimbabwe saw prices double every 24 hours. 1 trillion Zimbabwean dollars couldn't buy a bus ticket. And more recently? Venezuela, a once prosperous oil economy, reduced to hunger, bartering, and chaos. These weren't accidents. They were the result of broken systems, reckless printing, and blind trust in corrupt financial leadership. And here's the haunting part. The people living through those collapses? They didn't see it coming either. They worked hard, saved, believed in their governments. Until one day, their money stopped meaning anything. Could it happen again? Could it happen here? Today, we're told to trust the system. The experts. The economists. The central banks. They say, inflation is under control. The economy is stable. The currency is strong. But behind those calm headlines is a system glued together with confidence tricks. Governments run massive deficits. Central banks buy that debt with money they create. Then they flood the system with liquidity, hoping no one notices the foundation is hollow. Meanwhile, media and markets play along. Why? Because the whole system runs on belief. If the public stopped believing in the value of their money, the entire structure would collapse overnight. That's why they call it fiat currency. From the Latin word meaning, let it be so. Fiat money has no intrinsic value. It's worth something because they say it is. But look around. Trust is fraying. In rising prices. In unaffordable homes. In broken promises. And once trust is gone? Not even all the central banks in the world can bring it back. When you hear the word inflation, what comes to mind? Higher prices. Expensive rent. Shrinking groceries. But what if I told you? Inflation isn't just a problem. It's a policy. Governments and central banks actively target inflation every year. They say, 2% is healthy. But for who? Let's break it down. If you earn $50,000 this year, and inflation is 2%, that's a loss of $1,000 in purchasing power. Every single year. Your wages? Flat. Your savings? Dying in silence. But those who own assets, stocks, property, companies, they benefit from inflation. Because while the dollar loses value, their asset prices go up. It's a reverse pipeline. Wealth flows from savers to asset holders, from the middle class to the top. And the best part? They never have to raise a single tax. Inflation does the dirty work. Quietly, relentlessly. It's not a bug in the system. It is the system. When money loses trust, collapse isn't a question of if. It's a question of when. And when it happens fast. People dump their currency. Markets freeze. Banks limit withdrawals. And just like that, the thing you worked for, saved, and sacrificed to earn becomes worthless. In those moments, people turn to alternatives. Gold. Crypto. Barter. Even cigarettes or rice. Because when the system fails, people fall back on what's trusted. Tangible. Scarce. Independent. That's why governments get nervous when alternatives rise. It's not just about financial safety. It's about losing control. Gold-backed currencies threaten fiat hegemony. Decentralized crypto removes the middleman. Local currencies empower communities. Each one chips away at the centralized control of global finance. That's why they get regulated, taxed, banned, or ridiculed in the media. Because the more choices you have, the harder it is to keep you in the system. And when people begin choosing differently, the entire game begins to change. So what happens? When people stop trusting the system, do leaders admit the problem? Do they rebuild faith? Not usually. Instead, they reach for something easier than trust. Control. More regulation. More monitoring. More tracking. We see it everywhere. Cashless societies. Digital ID systems. Real-time transaction monitoring. You swipe a card. They log it. You send a payment. They trace it. You question the system online. And sometimes, your account goes silent. They call it security. But make no mistake. It's about containment. Because if trust is crumbling, they need another way to keep people inside the system. That's where digital currencies come in. Not just money. Programmable behavior. With limits. Expiry. Enforcement. We're not moving toward freedom. We're moving toward a world where control pretends to be convenience. And most won't even notice. Until they hit the invisible wall. Have you ever asked yourself, why don't more people question the system? Prices rise. Wages stall. Debts grow. And still, we show up. Work harder. Pay more. Why? Because money isn't just economic. It's psychological. The system doesn't run on force. It runs on belief. And routine. You get a paycheck. You pay bills. You swipe. You tap. You scroll. Everything is automatic. Seamless. And that's by design. The more effortless it feels, the less likely you are to question it. But deep down, many people feel it. That something is off. That no matter how hard they work, they're standing on a treadmill, not moving forward. But fear keeps them compliant. Fear of losing access. Of being locked out. Of stepping off the grid. So they stay silent. Smile at the price hikes. Blame themselves. Not realizing the game was never designed for them to win. Imagine this. One morning, millions of people around the world wake up. They realize, wait. I don't control my money. I don't create it. But I'm the one working 40, 60, 80 hours a week for it? The illusion cracks. They see how the system feeds on their effort, while quietly handing the profits to the top. Now imagine they say, no more. They start asking questions. Why do banks create money, but I can't? Why do we bail out billionaires, but not our neighbors? Why is debt the only path to progress? They stop spending blindly. Start learning. Start building alternatives. Like community currencies. Co-ops. Even decentralized finance. The system doesn't collapse all at once. It resists. Fights back. Smears those who dissent. But once the spell is broken, it can't be recast. Because when people understand money, they understand power. And when they understand power, they start demanding a different world. So what happens after the awakening? Do people just revolt in the streets? Not necessarily. Some quietly stop playing the game. They move their money from big banks to local credit unions. They invest in community-owned businesses, not stock markets rigged for the elite. They start using decentralized digital currencies, where no single bank or government pulls the strings. Meanwhile, innovators begin designing something new. A system where money isn't created as debt, but as a shared asset. Where local economies matter more than Wall Street profits. Where transparency replaces backroom deals. Schools begin teaching financial literacy as early as math. Kids grow up understanding how banks work. And how to think critically about money. Slowly, trust shifts. From governments and central banks to networks of people. Co-creating a system designed for humans, not profits. Is it perfect? No. But it's resilient. Adaptive. And it doesn't pretend to be neutral while rigging the rules. And that's when something incredible happens. People no longer fear money. They use it. Shape it. Understand it. And that changes everything. But let's not get too comfortable. Because power? It doesn't give up easily. As people begin to shift away from the old system, the banking elite, the so-called cartel, begin their counterattack. They call decentralization dangerous. They warn that cryptocurrencies fuel crime. They push new regulations, not to protect people, but to regain control. The IMF, BIS, and central banks start releasing their own digital currencies. They market them as modern, efficient, even revolutionary. But behind the sleek interface lies a new level of surveillance. Every transaction traceable. Every digital dollar programmable. Spend it on the wrong thing? It might just expire. Or get frozen. And the media? Many fall in line, dismissing financial reformers as conspiracy theorists and activists as economic threats. But the resistance doesn't stop there. It's subtle, strategic, backed by think tanks, lobbying groups, and tech monopolies. And it forces a question. Will this revolution be absorbed? Or can it survive? At a fork in the road. Two futures. Two vastly different outcomes. In one future, money becomes even more centralized. Every purchase tracked. Every loan scored by an algorithm. A society where your bank account can be switched off with a line of code. Where access to money depends on compliance, not rights. But there's another path. A path shaped by awareness. By decentralized tools. By people asking hard questions. Like, who really controls the money? What is my savings actually worth? And how can we build a better system? It's a road filled with uncertainty. But also hope. You see, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Every empire that manipulated its money eventually fell. Every power structure that resisted change was eventually replaced. So today, we're not just watching a financial system evolve. We're living through a monetary revolution. And your understanding of it might just be the most valuable asset you. Have you ever wondered who really calls the shots in the global economy? Not your local politician. Not even your national central bank. Behind the scenes, a network of powerful institutions has emerged: International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the Bank for International Settlements. These are not household names, but they influence nearly every aspect of the global financial system. Let's go back to 1944. Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. As World War II was ending, global leaders gathered to design a new economic order. They didn't just rebuild economies, they laid the foundation for global control. Out of that meeting came the IMF and World Bank. And later, the BIS would rise in power as the bank for central banks. What's interesting is, these institutions weren't elected by anyone. Yet they decide how much debt a country can take, what policies it must adopt, and even what currencies should dominate. And guess what? Most of the influence comes from a small group of powerful nations, especially the US. This isn't a conspiracy, it's public record. But most people never dig deep enough to see it. So, how did we go from sovereign national economies to a tightly woven web controlled by a few global players? That's what we'll uncover in this chapter. Stay with me. When a country is in crisis, who do they call? Not superheroes. Not their citizens. They call the IMF and the World Bank. These institutions step in with money, advice, and reforms. Sounds generous, right? But here's the fine print. The loans come with strings. Lots of them. Countries must cut public spending, slash wages, sell off national assets to private investors. This isn't just help. It's leverage. Once the loan is accepted, the country is locked into a contract. Not just with numbers, but with ideologies. Privatize education. Deregulate industries. Allow foreign corporations to enter. All under the banner of economic reform. The results? Sometimes growth. But often, increased inequality, civil unrest, and long-term dependence. And who benefits most? Global lenders. Foreign corporations. Not the people living on the ground. So the question remains. Are these institutions saving countries? Or quietly reshaping them? Imagine this. A country needs roads, power, and clean water. But it doesn't have the money. So it borrows. From global institutions. From private lenders. From foreign powers. Now, the debt grows. Interest compounds. And before long, the country is spending more on repayments than on schools or hospitals. This isn't just bad math. It's modern colonization. But instead of taking land by force, power is gained through contracts and debt obligations. Want loan forgiveness? Open your markets. Deregulate your economy. Privatize your utilities. Debt becomes a tool. Not just to pressure governments, but to control policy, trade, even elections. And when the burden becomes too heavy, infrastructure is sold to foreign investors. Public services are auctioned off. Foreign currency reserves vanish to pay interest. This isn't about saving countries. It's about owning them, without firing a single shot. The chains of empire? They're no longer made of iron. They're made of debt. When we hear foreign aid or global assistance, we picture schools, hospitals, clean water. But where does the money really go? Let's follow the trail. A developing country takes a $1 billion loan from the IMF. But that money doesn't go into the hands of citizens. It goes to pay foreign contractors, consultants, multinational corporations. Roads get built, but by companies based in New York or London. Energy plants open, but profits leave the country. The country carries the debt, but the real earnings flow back to the lenders. Sometimes, the loan money goes directly to pay previous debt. It's a cycle. Borrow, repay, borrow again, with interest. And who gains the most? Banks, engineering firms, legal consultants. All tied to the same countries that fund the global institutions. It's a closed loop. And at the center of it are deals signed in quiet rooms by people who will never live in the communities they reshape. This isn't aid. It's extraction. Wrapped in paperwork. Sold as generosity. And paid for by people who never asked for it. When a country's in debt, the lenders offer a solution. Privatize. Sell your state-owned assets. Let private companies run your water, your power, your transportation. It's framed as efficiency. Let the market decide. But here's what really happens. A nation sells its lifelines to foreign investors. And the public? Starts paying more. For less. Water becomes a luxury. Electricity bills skyrocket. Public transport systems collapse under private fees. All while the profits leave the country. Local workers are replaced. Community oversight is gone. And when the people protest, they're told it's the price of progress. But this isn't progress. It's economic displacement. A quiet transfer of power, from the public to private hands. And often, those hands are foreign. Multinational corporations. Hedge funds. Pension firms from halfway around the world. In the end, a nation loses not just control over its resources, but over its future. Because when you sell your water, your roads, your hospitals, what do you really have left? Crises are supposed to be rare, unexpected, tragic. But what if some of them were useful? Not for the people, but for the powerful. Economic collapse. Currency crashes. Massive inflation. These moments are terrifying. But they also create opportunity. When people are desperate, governments will do almost anything for stability. That's when the deals come. We'll help you. But first, sign here. Deregulate. Cut pensions. Fire public workers. Sell your oil reserves. This is called shock therapy. It's not a conspiracy. It's a documented economic strategy. Naomi Klein wrote about it. Economists have debated it for decades. Use the crisis. Force reforms fast. Before anyone can push back. The playbook has been used in Argentina, Greece, Indonesia, Russia. And the result is often the same. A weaker public. A richer elite. And a nation more dependent than ever. Crises don't always break the system. Sometimes they are the system. Most people think the rules of the global economy are written in parliaments, debated in Congress, or voted on by citizens. But that's not how it works. The real rules are crafted in private meetings, elite summits, and closed-door sessions. Groups like the G7, the G20, the BIS, and the IMF regularly meet to coordinate policy. But who's invited? Not teachers. Not farmers. Not workers. It's central bankers, CEOs, trade lawyers. The language is technical. The documents are hundreds of pages. And the media barely covers it. But within those papers are the rules that determine how much you pay for food, what interest you earn on your savings, and how easy it is for foreign corporations to own your country's land. Global trade agreements, currency standards, capital flow regulations, all written by people you can't vote out. And when these rules fail, when economies crash, or poverty spikes, who takes the blame? Not the rulemakers. Not the institutions. The blame falls on the nation itself. Even when it was never playing a fair game. For decades, the global financial system was dominated by the West. The US dollar reigned supreme. And institutions like the IMF and World Bank held the keys to survival. But now? Something is shifting. Enter BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Together, they represent over 3 billion people, massive natural resources, and growing economic power. And they're tired of playing by Western rules. In recent years, BRICS has built its own development bank, discussed a new global currency, and begun trading in local currencies instead of the dollar. This is more than competition. It's a challenge to the current financial empire. And that scares the old system. Because if BRICS succeeds, it could weaken the US dollar's dominance, reshape global trade, and offer countries a new way out of Western debt traps. It's still early. But the cracks are showing. A multipolar world is emerging. And the question now is, will this shift lead to more freedom and fairness? Or just a new empire in different clothes? You've seen the system, the rules, the power, the game behind the game. But now the question is, what can you do? Because while governments negotiate and institutions scheme, it's regular people who get caught in the middle. So how do you protect yourself? First, education. Understand how money works, where it comes from, who controls it. Most people live their whole lives chasing money, without ever knowing what it really is. That's no longer acceptable. Second, diversify. Don't rely on just one currency, one bank, or one employer. Build multiple streams. Learn new skills. Own something real, not just digits on a screen. Third, connect locally. The more fragile global systems become, the more important local support becomes. Start with your neighborhood, your community, your people. Finally, question everything. If a policy doesn't make sense, ask who benefits. If a law helps the powerful and hurts the many, it's time to speak up. The system may be global, but your power starts right where you are. By now, you know. This isn't just about interest rates, or balance sheets, or international loans. This is about control. Who has it? Who doesn't? And what that means for the world we live in. You've seen how money is created, how debt is weaponized, how rules are written in private, and how entire nations are reshaped by invisible hands. But the deeper truth is that money isn't the end game. It's just the tool. The real goal is compliance, predictable behavior, contained resistance, and economies designed not to empower people, but to extract from them. Still, history shows us something else too. Systems built on imbalance always crack. Empires fall. Currencies collapse. People wake up. And when they do, everything changes. The world is shifting. The old order is trembling. And what comes next? will be written by those who understand the game. You are one of them now. And in Chapter 6, we ask, what happens when the world's most powerful currency starts to lose its... For nearly a century, one currency has ruled the world. Not by force, but by trust, habit, and a carefully maintained illusion. The US dollar. Used in over 80% of global trade. Held in reserves by nearly every central bank. Oil, gold, food, medicine. Priced in dollars. Countries borrow in dollars. Lend in dollars. Peg their own currencies to the dollar. But why? What makes a piece of green paper, printed by a single nation, the lifeblood of global finance? It began in 1944. The Bretton Woods Agreement. The U.S. had the world's largest gold reserves. And after World War II, the world needed stability. So the dollar was crowned king. Backed by gold. Backed by power. And even when the gold link was severed in 1971, the world kept using dollars anyway. Because by then, the dollar was more than a currency. It was a weapon, a bridge, and a cage, all at once. But no empire lasts forever. And the cracks? They're starting to show. The US dollar isn't just a currency. It's a tool of control. After the gold standard ended in 1971, the US struck a deal with Saudi Arabia. Oil would be priced in dollars, no matter who bought it. And just like that, every country on earth needed dollars. This was the birth of the petrodollar system. Energy, the backbone of civilization, now ran through the U.S. Federal Reserve. But it didn't stop there. The dollar became the global lending currency. Developing countries borrowed in dollars and became trapped by them. Miss a payment? Face economic collapse. Challenge the system? Face sanctions. Sanctions became a financial weapon. Swift disconnections. Frozen reserves. Dollar access revoked. Nations watched and learned. The dollar gave power. But it also gave the U.S. incredible leverage. And now? That power is starting to backfire. Countries are tired of playing by U.S. rules. Russia, China, Iran, Brazil, even allies. They're building alternatives. Trading in local currencies. Stockpiling gold. Exploring crypto. The dollar's dominance isn't being overthrown. It's being eroded. Quietly. Strategically. And maybe unstoppably. The dollar doesn't hold value because it's backed by gold. It holds value because the world believes in it. But what happens when that belief starts to fade? Countries start trading in other currencies. Central banks reduce their dollar reserves. And investors? They start running into gold, into commodities, into other nations' bonds. Slowly, silently, the demand for dollars begins to fall. And with it, the ability of the U.S. to print money without consequence. Think about that. For decades, America could run deficits, print trillions, and the world would still hold its currency. But in a post-dollar world? That changes. Imports become more expensive. Global investment flows elsewhere. Interest rates rise. Just to keep the dollar afloat. And the ripple effect? It hits you. Higher prices at the grocery store. More costly fuel. A shrinking retirement fund. Because when trust in the dollar breaks, the American lifestyle gets a harsh reality check. And the U.S. is no longer an empire by default. It becomes just another debtor in a world of shifting alliances. All around the world, a quiet rebellion is growing. It's not loud. Not violent. But it's powerful. It's called de-dollarization. For decades, nearly all international trade flowed through the US dollar. But now, countries are asking a dangerous question. Why should we keep using their money to buy our stuff? Russia and China are trading in yuan and rubles. India is buying oil in rupees. Brazil and Argentina are building payment systems outside the dollar. Even Saudi Arabia, the birthplace of the petrodollar, is now signing oil deals in other currencies. At first, these moves seemed symbolic. But now? They're accelerating. Central banks are dumping US bonds. Gold reserves are rising. New trade alliances are forming, like BRICS and the SCO. Built specifically to bypass the dollar. And why? Because countries are tired of being vulnerable to US sanctions, watching their reserves get frozen, playing by someone else's financial rules. De-dollarization is no longer a theory. It's a movement. And though it may take years, the foundation is already shaking. The world has never truly known life after the dollar. Not in modern times. But now, that future is coming into focus. In a post-dollar world, trade becomes fragmented. Instead of one global currency, we get regional systems. China trades in yuan. Africa creates local currency blocks. South America develops digital alternatives. Some countries build alliances. Others are left behind. Without the dollar as a middleman, the US loses one of its greatest powers: the ability to print its way out of problems. And with that goes its global influence. Military power becomes harder to fund. Debt becomes harder to ignore. Meanwhile, new powers rise. Nations that were once locked out of the system begin to shape their own. The IMF? Weakened. The World Bank? Replaced. And everyday people? They're caught in the middle. Between collapsing systems and untested alternatives. There's no guarantee this new world will be better. But it will be different. And the rules are being written right now. The fall of the dollar may not lead to chaos. It may lead to something more controlled. Central banks are already preparing. Testing digital currencies that replace cash. With code. It's called a CBDC. A central bank digital currency. And on the surface, it sounds great. Fast payments. Lower costs. No more cash crimes. But underneath? Something deeper. Something darker. A CBDC can be programmed. That means your money could expire after 30 days. Be blocked from unapproved vendors. Be frozen with a single click. This isn't just currency. It's behavioral control, disguised as convenience. You eat too much red meat? Spending capped. You criticize the wrong policy online? Your wallet goes quiet. Cash gave us privacy. CBDCs remove it. In a post-dollar world, we may not get more freedom. We may get perfect obedience. Controlled by lines of code. And approved by those in power. The scariest part? It's already being tested. In countries all around the world. Every action has a reaction. And as financial control tightens, resistance is growing. Around the world, people are waking up. Developers are building decentralized currencies. Movements are pushing for cash protection laws. Nations are exploring gold-backed alternatives. In the EU, citizens demanded the right to use physical money. In the US, bills have been proposed to ban programmable money. This isn't just about tech. It's about rights. The right to save without being watched. The right to spend without being scored. The right to dissent without being debanked. Some are turning to Bitcoin. Others to community currencies. And some to precious metals and barter systems. It's not one solution. It's a movement. A belief that money should serve people, not control them. And while governments push for efficiency, people are pushing back for freedom. The war for the future of money isn't just political. It's personal. Systems don't usually fall slowly. They fall suddenly. After years of quiet decay. The dollar's decline might feel distant, gradual. But what if it snaps? What if trust breaks overnight? A major country dumps its dollar reserves. Oil trades switch to gold or yuan. Sanctions spark retaliation from the East. Suddenly, the world no longer wants US bonds. And trillions come flooding back home. What happens next? Massive inflation. A dollar crash. Interest rates spike. Imports become unaffordable. Supply chains stall. Global markets freeze in panic. Confidence collapses. And with it, the illusion of control. In the US, The lifestyle long propped up by cheap credit begins to unravel. In developing countries, currencies tethered to the dollar fall with it. And in the chaos, new systems rush to fill the vacuum. But nothing is ready. And in that moment, the world could face a financial reset. Unlike anything we've seen in generations. The real danger isn't the fall itself. It's what replaces it. If the system shifts, slowly or suddenly, what matters most isn't just what you own. It's how you think. Because money is changing. But so is trust. So is risk. So is stability. In uncertain times, you need more than savings. You need awareness. Start by learning how the system works. Understand inflation, debt, monetary policy. Not as theory, but as daily survival. Build financial resilience. Diversify your assets. Reduce your exposure to single points of failure. But go further. Develop real skills. Learn how to grow, fix, create, teach. Because in collapse, currency is unstable. But value always matters. Build strong local networks. Your neighbors may be more valuable than your online bank account. And most importantly, adopt a mindset of adaptability. The world ahead may not reward those who are rich, but those who are ready. Because when everything changes, the most valuable currency is clarity. So here we are. At the end of the dollar story. Or maybe just the end of its dominance. We followed the trail. From Bretton Woods. To petrodollars. To sanctions. To rebellion. We've seen how trust was built. How it was weaponized. And how it's now unraveling. But this story isn't really about currency. It's about control. About who gets to shape the rules. And who's forced to live by them. It's about you. Your future. Your freedom. Your ability to choose something different. Because as the world enters a new financial chapter, the question isn't just, what comes after the dollar? It's, what kind of system do we want to build? One where money tracks your every move? Or one where people and communities take back control? The collapse of an empire is always followed by the rise of something new. And the truth is, that next chapter